It was early morning in the Grand Hotel, just as the first rays of sunlight were slipping through the tall glass windows. The lobby was quiet, except for the soft echo of footsteps on the polished marble floor. The hotel was one of the most luxurious in the city, with its shiny chandeliers, golden railings, and endless corridors. To most people, it was a place of glamour and excitement where the rich and famous came and went, living lives full of luxury. But for one young girl, it was just another place to work quietly and do her job without being noticed. She was a maid. Not just any maid, but one who moved almost like a shadow, so soft and quiet that people barely realized she was there. Her uniform was simple, her hair always tied back neatly, and her hands were gentle and careful as she cleaned each room. She had been working at the hotel for a few months, but she never sought attention. She liked things that way. There was a kind of comfort in being invisible, in doing her work without anyone looking too closely at her. Her life outside the hotel was simple too. She lived in a small rented room across the city. Her family wasn't wealthy, and she had no big dreams of fame or fortune. What she loved most were small, quiet moments. A cup of tea in the morning, the sound of rain on the window, the occasional hum of a song she remembered from childhood. Music had always been her escape. While her days were filled with cleaning and chores, she always found a way to carry a melody with her, even if it was just in her head. Meanwhile, high above her, in the top-floor office of the hotel, the CEO was staring out of his massive window. He was a man who had everything, or at least that's what it seemed like to everyone else. Rich, powerful, respected. But no one saw the cracks behind his eyes. No one knew that his life, filled with success and wealth, was also filled with loss, loneliness, and silent pain. People whispered about him being cold and distant, someone who never smiled without a reason. But behind that hard exterior, he was broken in ways no money could fix. He had lost people he loved, and the memories of those losses haunted him. He kept busy with work, making sure the hotel ran perfectly, but no matter what he did, the emptiness followed him. Meetings, appointments, business deals, they all seemed meaningless when he returned to his empty office at night. Sometimes he wondered if life had left him behind. And on days like this morning, with the quiet sunlight filtering in, that thought felt heavier than ever. As the maid moved through the corridors, carrying her cleaning supplies, she tried not to notice the grandeur around her. She focused on her work, dusting, sweeping, and polishing. It was honest work, and she took pride in doing it well. But there was something in the air that morning that felt different. Maybe it was the calm before the hotel came alive with guests. Or maybe it was just a feeling she could not explain after finishing her tasks in the lobby. She headed toward the staff area to take a short break. There was a small, old piano tucked away in a quiet corner of the hotel's lounge. It wasn't shiny or new like the rest of the hotel, but there was something comforting about it. Sometimes, when no one was around, she would sit and play. Music had a way of filling the empty spaces in her heart. It wasn't that she wanted to perform for anyone. She just needed to play, to let her emotions flow through the keys. That morning, as she pressed her fingers lightly on the piano, she closed her eyes. The notes were soft and careful, almost like a whisper. She let herself get lost in the melody, letting it carry her thoughts away from the day's worries. She played slowly, feeling each note, imagining a story in her mind that no one else would hear. High above, the CEO's office had large windows that faced the lounge. He was working on papers, reviewing schedules, and checking the hotel's finances. But something unusual happened. Amid the noise of the city outside, a soft sound reached him. A melody. Gentle, careful, almost hesitant, yet filled with a kind of beauty he hadn't realized he missed. He froze for a moment, listening. The music was unlike anything he had heard in years. It was simple, yet it carried emotion pure and unpretentious. He didn't know who was playing, and at first he thought he might be imagining it. But the notes continued, floating up through the glass, touching something deep inside him. Memories he thought he had buried started to surface. He remembered times when life was simpler, when joy came easily. He remembered the people he had lost, and instead of pain, there was a strange sense of calm washing over him. The maid, unaware of the listener above, continued to play. Each note was a tiny bridge between her quiet world and the broken man watching from afar. For the first time in years, he felt something shift inside him. It was as if the music had opened a door he didn't know existed. A door that led to hope, healing, and maybe even happiness. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. Eventually, the maid's melody came to a soft end. She lifted her hands, closed her eyes, and took a deep breath. She smiled faintly, feeling lighter than before. Music always had that effect on her. But she had no idea that the powerful CEO above was watching, that he had felt something he hadn't felt in years. The CEO leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling, trying to process what had just happened. He didn't understand why a simple melody could stir so much inside him. He didn't understand why he felt hopeful instead of empty. But deep down, he knew something had changed. For the first time in a long time, he wanted to see who had created that music. He wanted to find the source of the melody that had touched his heart so unexpectedly, and so, without realizing it, the lives of these two people, one shy and unnoticed, the other powerful and broken, were about to cross in ways neither of them could imagine. A small melody had begun to build a bridge, and soon everything would change. For now, the hotel resumed its usual rhythm. Guests started arriving, footsteps echoed through the hallways, and the quiet moments seemed almost forgotten. But for the CEO, the memory of the melody lingered. He returned to his work, but his mind kept drifting back to the soft, gentle notes. And for the maid, the music she had played felt like a secret gift. A small act that meant more than she could explain. Neither of them knew it yet. But that morning had set the stage for something extraordinary. A shy maid who had only wanted to be invisible had unknowingly begun a journey that would touch the heart of a broken man. And for him, a life that had felt empty was about to be filled with music. Hope and unexpected connection. It was just the beginning. The days passed slowly in the hotel, but the memory of that quiet melody lingered in the CEO's mind. He tried to focus on work, as he always did, moving through emails, meetings, and hotel inspections. But every time he closed his eyes or paused for a moment, the music returned. It wasn't just notes. It was a feeling, soft yet powerful, that made him remember what it meant to feel something real. The CEO was surprised by how much the melody had affected him. He had long stopped being easily moved. Life had made him careful, almost numb. He had built walls around himself, believing that emotions were weaknesses. Yet here was a stranger, a simple hotel maid, who had managed to pierce through all of that with something as simple as music. The thought puzzled him. How could someone, so quiet, so unnoticed, create something so powerful? Meanwhile, the maid continued her work as if nothing had changed. She cleaned rooms, polished tables, arranged towels, and tidied the hallways. Her life was simple, repetitive, and yet she didn't complain. She took pride in doing her job well. Music was her escape, a small joy she allowed herself. She never imagined anyone would notice her playing. For her, it was a secret world, a little safe space where she could breathe. One late afternoon, when most guests were out and the lobby was quiet, she found herself drawn to the piano again. She had finished her chores early and had a few minutes of free time. The old piano sat in its usual corner, looking as if it had been waiting for her. She approached it, hesitated for a moment, and then let her fingers glide over the keys. The melody started softly, almost shyly, like the maid herself. It was delicate, flowing like water over stones. She didn't play for anyone. She played for herself, letting her emotions guide her hands. As she played, she forgot the world outside. She forgot the long hours, the tired arms, and the endless work. In those moments, the music was her friend, her voice, and her heart all at once. Up in the CEO's office, something unexpected happened. He had been working late, reviewing invoices and hotel reports, when the melody reached him again. He stopped, frozen in place, listening carefully. This time, he could hear every note, every tiny nuance. There was a gentleness in the way it moved, a softness that contrasted sharply with the harsh, fast-paced world he lived in. He felt drawn to it, compelled to find out who was creating it. He left his office quietly, careful not to be seen by his staff. He walked down the marble staircases, following the sound that seemed to call to him. The lobby was empty, silent except for the faint echo of the piano, and then in the corner he saw her. The maid, small and unassuming, her head bent over the piano, her hands moving gracefully across the keys. She didn't notice him at first. The CEO paused, watching her for a long moment. There was something in her focus, in her dedication to the music, that touched him deeply. She was unaware of his presence, completely absorbed in her own world. He realized that she was not performing for anyone. She was playing because it was who she was. There was honesty in that, something rare in his life filled with pretenses and appearances. The maid finished the piece and lifted her hands slowly. She let out a small sigh, pleased with herself. For her, it was a quiet victory, a moment of expression that no one would ever know about. Then she felt a presence behind her. She turned quickly, startled to see the CEO standing there. Her heart skipped a beat. She had never imagined that someone like him would be watching her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The CEO, usually so composed and stern, felt a strange nervousness. He had no idea what to say. And the maid, shy and reserved, didn't know whether she should apologize or continue playing. There was a quiet tension in the air, a fragile pause between two worlds colliding. Finally, the CEO spoke, his voice soft, almost unsure. "That was beautiful," he said. The words sounded simple, but to the maid they felt monumental. She nodded slightly, unsure how to respond. She wasn't used to praise, especially from someone so powerful. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Instead of walking away, the CEO stayed. He asked her if she could play again, if she would share the melody once more. The maid hesitated, feeling exposed, but something in his eyes, a genuine curiosity, a lack of judgment, made her agree. She began to play again, and this time she felt a small spark of confidence. As the music filled the lounge, the CEO felt something shift inside him. He closed his eyes, letting the melody wash over him. He remembered moments from his own life, memories he had tried to forget. The laughter of people he had lost, the warmth of moments long gone, the feeling of hope he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. The music wasn't just notes. It was a bridge to his own emotions, a connection he hadn't realized he needed. Over the next few days, this quiet routine began to form. The CEO started to arrive at the lounge during quiet hours, hoping to hear the music again. The maid played and he listened. At first, there were no words exchanged beyond a simple greeting, but slowly a bond began to form. Through music, they communicated without needing to speak. Her shy melodies told stories, and he understood them in ways he hadn't expected. People in the hotel noticed small changes. Staff whispered about the CEO spending more time in the lounge. Some guests commented on the soothing music that seemed to linger in the air, but no one knew the story behind it. The maid remained the same quiet girl, and the CEO remained the same powerful man. Yet, a subtle change had begun in both of them, invisible to the world, but deeply felt by the two individuals at the center of it. The maid started to play with more confidence, her shy demeanor softening just a little. She discovered that her music could reach someone else's heart, that it could make a difference beyond herself. She felt a quiet joy she had never felt before, a small but profound sense of purpose. The CEO, meanwhile, found himself looking forward to these moments. For the first time in years, he experienced peace and contentment that had nothing to do with money or control. The melody became a lifeline, a gentle reminder that life still held beauty and connection. He began to reflect on his past, not with bitterness, but with acceptance. He realized that healing could come in unexpected ways, and sometimes the smallest. Acts like a shy girl playing a simple tune could hold the greatest power. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the hotel's lights cast a warm glow, the maid finished a particularly heartfelt melody. The CEO stood silently, watching her hands lift from the keys. He felt a mix of emotions: gratitude, awe, and something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. She turned to him, her face flushed with shyness. "Did you like it?" she asked softly. He nodded. "More than you can imagine." "Thank you." For the first time, there was a moment of genuine connection, a bridge between two very different lives. They both understood that something important was beginning, even if neither of them knew exactly what it would become. That night, as they went their separate ways, both carried a sense of change within them. The maid, once invisible and unsure, felt seen. The CEO, once broken and distant, felt a spark of life returning. Music had created a link between them, a quiet, unspoken bond that would grow stronger with time. It was a beginning that neither of them could have predicted. A shy maid and a broken CEO, brought together by a simple melody, were about to embark on a journey neither had ever imagined. And although the hotel continued to bustle with its usual activity, for these two the world had shifted in a way that would change everything. Days turned into weeks, and the quiet connection between the maid and the CEO grew stronger without words. Each time she played, he listened, sitting in the corner of the lounge or leaning quietly against the wall, careful not to intrude on her space. Slowly, he realized that this simple routine was changing him. He no longer felt the constant weight of emptiness pressing on his chest. Her melodies were small, gentle things, but they reached a part of him that he thought had been lost forever. The maid began to notice subtle changes, too. She could feel his presence sometimes before she even looked up, almost like a gentle shadow, watching but never judging. She didn't understand why, but she found herself wanting to play better, more confidently, as if her music could repay the comfort it brought him. For a shy, quiet girl, this was a new feeling. She had never imagined that her small melodies could touch someone else's heart so deeply. One afternoon, the hotel was unusually empty. Most guests had gone out for the day, and the staff were busy in their corners. The maid approached the piano with her usual nervous excitement. She adjusted her uniform, smoothed her hair, and sat down carefully. The first note rang out softly, filling the empty lounge with a delicate, tender sound. She closed her eyes, letting her fingers find the melody as if they had a mind of their own. The CEO, who had been sitting quietly at a distance, stepped a little closer than usual. There was a curiosity in his eyes, but also a hesitation. He knew he should remain invisible to let her play in peace. But something made him want to see the face behind the music, the person who had unknowingly changed the rhythm of his days. He stayed at the edge of the lounge, careful not to interrupt, careful not to frighten her. The maid played a longer piece than usual, her hands moving with more confidence, more emotion. She had not noticed that he had moved closer. And then, when she finally opened her eyes, she saw him, standing silently, watching and smiling ever so slightly. Her heart jumped. She had not expected this. She felt exposed, like someone had looked straight into a secret part of her soul. I didn't know anyone was listening, she said softly, almost whispering. He shook his head. I wasn't trying to startle you, I needed to hear it again. Her hands trembled slightly as she rested them on the keys. For a moment, there was silence between them. Neither knew what to say next. The maid, used to staying invisible, felt unsure of how to behave. The CEO, used to control, felt unsure of how to approach someone who had no interest in him at all except for the music. I can play another song if you want, she said finally. Her voice was quiet, but there was courage behind it. He nodded, a soft smile touching his lips. I'd like that very much. As she began to play, something shifted. The music no longer felt like a secret or an escape. It became a conversation. Every note spoke to him, told him something about her, her heart, and her world. And in turn, he felt compelled to respond not with words, but with presence, with attention, with understanding. The space between them was shrinking, slowly but surely. Over the next few days, the routine continued. Sometimes he arrived earlier than usual, sitting quietly in the corner. Sometimes he lingered longer, not wanting the moment to end. The maid began to play without hesitation, more openly, more freely. She realized that he was not judging her, not demanding anything, simply listening and appreciating. That simple acceptance gave her courage. For a shy girl who had always been unnoticed, it was a new, powerful feeling. One afternoon, an unexpected moment occurred. A guest entered the lounge, and the maid froze, worried she might be scolded for playing the piano during work hours. But instead of reacting angrily, the CEO calmly stepped in front of her, blocking her from view, and whispered, "It's okay, play." The maid felt a warmth she had never known before. He was protecting her, trusting her, and allowing her to shine in her own way. She began to play again, the notes flowing with more emotion than ever. The melody was different now, bold, confident, yet still gentle. It told a story of someone finding their voice and someone else learning to feel again. The CEO, listening closely, felt his heart shift with each note. He realized how much he had been missing, not just in life, but in himself. Her music was teaching him to feel, to open his heart, to let go of the armor he had built around himself for so many years. For the first time, he understood that healing did not come from work or control. It came from connection, from seeing and being seen, from letting someone in, even if it was just for a few notes of music. As the days passed, their connection deepened. Words were still few, but gestures and glances carried meaning. The maid would nod or smile shyly, and the CEO would respond with a small approving smile or a subtle nod of encouragement. It was an unspoken friendship, a quiet bond that neither had expected but both cherished. One evening, the hotel was unusually quiet, the sky outside painted with soft shades of pink and gold. The maid began a melody that was slower, more reflective, almost melancholic. It was different from her usual tunes, carrying a depth of feeling that surprised even her. She realized she was sharing more of herself than she had before, trusting the unseen listener to understand her heart. The CEO listened, feeling emotions he had long buried. The melody brought memories of his past, moments of happiness, pain, and loss. But unlike before, he did not feel crushed by them. Instead, he felt lighter, as if the music was helping him process the weight he had carried for so long. He realized that she had unknowingly become a guide, leading him toward healing with each gentle note. After the music ended, the maid lifted her hands and looked at him. "Did you like it?" she asked softly. He nodded, his eyes reflecting something rare vulnerability. "I did, more than you can know. Thank you for sharing this with me." For the first time, there was a pause filled not with awkwardness but with understanding. Words were unnecessary. The silence spoke volumes. Both realized that their worlds, so different, had begun to intertwine in a way neither could have imagined. From that day forward, the maid no longer felt nervous when he was around. She had learned to trust him, to see that his attention was not judgmental, but kind and genuine. And the CEO had begun to see her not just as a shy girl playing piano, but as someone with courage, talent, and heart, a person capable of touching lives in ways he had never expected. Little by little, their lives started to change. The maid gained confidence, her shy smiles becoming more frequent, her posture more relaxed. She realized that she had a gift, and that gift could impact others. And the CEO, once cold and distant, began to feel emotions he had long thought were gone: hope, joy, and even a small sense of belonging. It was more than music now. It was a bond, a shared journey of healing and discovery. And although neither knew where it would lead, both understood that their meeting had been no accident. A shy girl, who had only wanted to remain unseen, was slowly transforming the life of a man who had given up on feeling. And in turn, he was giving her something she had never had before: recognition, respect, and the courage to believe in herself. That afternoon ended like many others, with the maid leaving the piano and the CEO watching silently, feeling a mixture of admiration and gratitude. For both, the lounge had become a sanctuary, a place where they could simply exist, feel, and connect. And though the rest of the hotel moved on with its normal rhythm, these two people had discovered something extraordinary: that even the smallest gestures, the quietest notes, could bridge worlds and hearts in ways nothing else could. Little did they know, this was only the beginning. Their connection would grow stronger, and challenges would come, testing their trust and courage. But the foundation had been set. The shy maid and the broken CEO, once strangers, were now bound by an invisible thread woven from melody, understanding, and the quiet magic of human connection. Weeks had passed since the shy maid and the CEO had quietly connected over the piano. Their bond had grown stronger, though still unspoken, a delicate thread woven from shared moments, melodies, and understanding. Yet life rarely allows comfort to remain uninterrupted. Changes were quietly approaching, and with them came challenges neither of them had expected. The hotel had always been a place of order, appearances, and rules. While guests admired its elegance, the staff often felt pressure to meet every standard, and hierarchy mattered. The CEO, powerful and respected, had to maintain a certain image, strong, confident, and untouchable. To many, associating too closely with staff, especially a shy, low-ranking maid, would have been seen as inappropriate. Yet he found himself drawn to the lounge, drawn to the music that reminded him of something he had almost forgotten, the ability to feel, for the maid. Things were changing too. She had grown in confidence, her melodies carrying more emotion and courage than ever before. She had discovered a quiet pride in her talent, but it also made her nervous. She had been unnoticed for so long that being recognized even gently felt strange. She worried that her talent might not be accepted by the rest of the hotel, or, worse, that she might disappoint the one person who had come to appreciate it so deeply. One afternoon, the quiet of the lounge was interrupted. Another staff member, curious about the CEO's unusual presence near the piano, appeared. They had noticed him visiting the lounge often and whispered questions among themselves. "Why is he always here? Who is she?" they asked, skeptical and judgmental. Staff gossip spread quickly in the hotel, and soon, whispers reached higher floors. The CEO was aware of the murmurs but chose to ignore them. He had felt the music, the emotion, the power of the connection it had sparked, and he was not willing to let judgment interfere. Yet he also knew that the world outside their small bubble was less forgiving, and that knowledge brought a quiet tension into the lounge, one that the shy maid could feel that day. As she approached the piano, she hesitated. She could sense the change in atmosphere, the tension lingering in the air. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted them over the keys. She wondered if she should play or step back. But the CEO, noticing her hesitation, offered a small nod of encouragement, silent and reassuring. "Play," his eyes seemed to say, and she trusted him. She began to play. Slowly at first, letting the melody build carefully. The notes filled the room with gentle warmth, yet beneath them, there was tension and unspoken struggle between fear and courage. The CEO listened closely, his presence steady and calm, as if to shield her from any negativity surrounding them. He understood that for her, this moment was more than music. It was courage in motion, the act of showing her heart to the world. As she played, the whispers outside grew louder. A few hotel staff had gathered near the lounge doorway, curious and judgmental. Some frowned, thinking it unusual that the CEO would spend so much time listening to a maid play. Others whispered doubts about the maid herself, questioning her abilities and background. She noticed them and faltered for a moment, unsure if she should continue. The CEO, sensing her insecurity, stepped slightly closer, not to intimidate, but to protect. "Ignore them," he said quietly, though his voice was low enough for only her to hear. "This is yours. Play for yourself, not for them." Encouraged by his words, she let her hands move freely across the keys again. The music flowed more beautifully than ever before, carrying not only her talent but also her courage. It was a defiance of doubt and fear, a statement that she would not let the judgment of others diminish her spirit. Each note seemed to carry a message to those who doubted her. "This is my voice, and it matters." The whispers gradually faded. Some staff were impressed, silently acknowledging the depth and emotion in her music. Others remained skeptical, but even their skepticism had no power against the strength of her melody and the quiet support of the CEO. After finishing, she lifted her hands, feeling both relief and pride. Her face was flushed, and she avoided looking at anyone but the CEO. He smiled at her, a rare, genuine expression that carried approval, reassurance, and gratitude all at once. "That was incredible," he said softly. "Never doubt yourself. You have a gift, and it's meant to be shared." Her heart swelled at his words. It wasn't just praise. It was validation from someone she respected, someone whose opinion mattered more than anyone else's. For the first time, she felt that her music could reach beyond herself, that it could inspire and heal in ways she had never imagined. But life outside the lounge was relentless. A few days later, the hotel director called the CEO into his office. There had been complaints, questions, and subtle criticisms from guests and staff who noticed his frequent visits to the lounge. Some whispered that it was inappropriate, that a powerful man should not spend time with a junior staff member. The CEO listened quietly, not angry, but firm. He explained that the Maid's music was remarkable and that it had a positive effect on the hotel environment. He refused to let others' narrow judgments dictate his actions. Still, he realized that they had to be careful. Their bond, though meaningful, existed in a world that did not always understand genuine human connection. Meanwhile, the Maid continued to play, though a subtle tension lingered in her heart. She had never been judged so openly before, and though the CEO's support gave her strength, she felt the weight of the outside world pressing in. Her music, once a private sanctuary, had become something public, and she had to navigate the uncertainty with courage. One evening, after the hotel had quieted down, she sat at the piano alone, reflecting on the changes. She remembered the first time she had played for no one, the secret joy of being able to express herself without fear. Now, the room was no longer completely private. People had noticed, the CEO had watched, and her music had become a force that reached hearts beyond her own. She began to play, softly at first, then more confidently, letting the notes carry her story. Each melody was a mix of vulnerability and strength, of fear and courage. And in that music, she found herself again. She realized that challenges and judgment were inevitable, but they did not define her. Her gift was hers, and it had the power to touch others, to inspire, to heal even in a world full of doubt. The CEO arrived quietly, as he often did, listening to the notes without interrupting. He understood the struggle she faced, the courage it took to continue despite judgment. He admired her more than ever, not just for her talent, but for her bravery, her resilience, and her willingness to share her heart through music. The bond between them grew even stronger. The music was no longer just melodies. It was trust, encouragement, and a mutual understanding that neither could put into words. They had become companions in a journey neither had expected, navigating challenges together, finding solace and strength in their connection. In the quiet of the lounge that evening, the Maid finished her final note. She looked at the CEO, and for a moment words were unnecessary. The silence between them was filled with meaning, filled with recognition of all they had faced and all they had begun to overcome. The world outside might judge, doubt, or misunderstand, but in that moment, their bond was unshakable. They both knew that challenges would come again. Gossip, doubt, and the pressures of the hotel were not gone. But they also knew that they had each other, and that was more powerful than fear or judgment. A shy maid, once invisible, had begun to claim her space in the world. And a broken CEO, once closed off, had begun to open his heart to hope, trust, and connection. It was a turning point. Their journey was far from over, but the foundation had been laid. The music had carried them through fear and doubt. And now it was preparing them for the next chapter, one where courage, trust, and understanding would face new challenges, and where the power of human connection would continue to grow stronger and deeper than ever before. The hotel had never been quieter. It was evening, and most guests had returned to their rooms or gone out for dinner. The golden lights of the chandeliers reflected softly on the polished floors, casting a warm, comforting glow across the lounge. The piano sat quietly in its corner, as if waiting for the moment it had been made for. Tonight, the shy maid had something special in her heart. She didn't know exactly why, but she felt that this performance was different from any other she had given. She approached the piano with a mix of nervousness and excitement. Her hands trembled slightly, not because she was afraid, but because she knew she was ready to give everything she had. She had grown so much over the past weeks from a quiet girl who stayed in the shadows to someone brave enough to share her soul through music. Tonight, she would play not just for herself, or for the CEO, but for the world that was quietly waiting to be touched by her talent. The CEO arrived early, as he often did, but tonight he lingered near the piano in a way he had never done before. He wasn't just listening, he was present in every sense, ready to witness a moment he had longed for but never imagined could exist. He remembered the first time he had heard her music, the way it had quietly entered his heart and softened the edges of his pain. Tonight he felt a mixture of pride, admiration, and anticipation. The maid took a deep breath and began to play. The first note was soft, hesitant, almost shy, yet it carried a weight that surprised even her. As she continued, the music grew, each note a reflection of her journey, the nervousness, the courage, the hope, and the joy she had discovered along the way. Her fingers moved with confidence now, each chord resonating with a truth she had never dared to share before. As the melody filled the lounge, something remarkable happened. The music was no longer just hers, and it was no longer just his. It became something bigger, something that seemed to touch the walls, the floor, and even the air around them. If anyone had been listening from the outside, they might have stopped in awe, sensing the beauty and power of what was happening. But for the two of them, it was deeply personal, a language only they could understand. The CEO watched her, captivated. He felt emotions he had thought were lost forever. Tears threatened to form in his eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming sense of hope and healing. Every note reminded him of what life could be beyond loss, beyond loneliness. The shy maid, through her music, had given him something he had almost forgotten, the ability to feel again. Deeply and freely, the maid played on, pouring her heart into each note. She remembered the moments when she had felt unseen, unheard, and unimportant. And now, in the presence of someone who had listened, who had understood her without words, she felt seen. Truly seen. The power of that feeling gave her music a depth she had never reached before. It was as if every note carried a piece of her soul, sharing her story with the world for the first time. For a moment, the hotel seemed to disappear. There were no guests, no staff, no whispers or judgments. Only the music existed, and the connection between the two people who had found each other in a world that had long ignored them. The shy maid's melodies became a bridge, carrying them both to a place of understanding, trust, and unspoken love. As the final notes lingered in the air, a profound silence followed. It was the kind of silence that speaks louder than words, full of emotion and meaning. The maid's hands rested gently on the keys, and she looked up to meet the CEO's gaze. For a long moment, neither spoke. Their hearts were full, and words felt unnecessary. Finally, the CEO spoke, his voice soft but steady. "That was extraordinary," he said. "I've never heard anything like it in my life." The maid smiled, a shy but genuine expression. I didn't know if anyone would listen," she whispered. I wanted to play." "You've done more than play," he said, stepping closer. "You've changed something inside me. Something I thought was gone forever." Her eyes widened slightly. She hadn't realized the depth of her impact. She had simply played, sharing her heart through the music. And yet, here was someone, a powerful, respected man, telling her that her simple act had transformed his life. For the first time, she understood the true power of her gift. It wasn't just about notes or melodies. It was about courage, honesty, and the willingness to share a piece of oneself with the world. And tonight, she had done that completely, without fear or hesitation. The CEO extended his hand, not in formality, but in trust. "Thank you," he said simply. "For everything. For sharing yourself, for letting me feel again, for helping me heal." The maid hesitated, then reached out. Their hands met, a small but powerful gesture of connection. It wasn't romantic in the typical sense, it was deeper. It was respect, trust, and acknowledgement of the journey they had shared. The shy maid, once invisible and uncertain, and the broken CEO, once closed off and lonely, had found each other in a way that neither could have imagined. Over the next few moments, the hotel slowly returned to its usual rhythm. Guests passed by, some pausing to admire the lingering notes of the music, some unaware of the quiet miracle that had just occurred. But for the two of them, everything had changed. The piano, the lounge, the music, they had created a world where connection, healing, and courage existed. Untouched by judgment or expectation, the maid felt a lightness in her heart she had never known before. She had discovered that her voice, her talent, and her heart mattered. She had realized that even the quietest, most overlooked people could have a profound impact on others' lives. And the CEO, watching her with admiration, felt a warmth he had thought was gone forever. He had found hope, trust, and a reminder that life, even after loss, could hold moments of pure beauty. Days turned into weeks, and the changes were noticeable. The maid's confidence grew, her shy smiles becoming more frequent, her posture more relaxed. She began to believe in herself and her abilities in ways she never had before. Guests and staff noticed her growing presence. Though few realized the depth of the journey she had undertaken, the CEO too transformed. His demeanor softened, his smiles became more genuine, and his heart opened to life in ways he hadn't imagined possible. He still carried the weight of his past, but the music, the maid, and the bond they shared had taught him that healing is possible, even for those who feel broken beyond repair. One afternoon, the maid played for a group of guests who had gathered in the lounge. This time she played confidently, her hands flowing over the keys with grace and emotion. The audience was captivated, not just by her talent, but by the depth and sincerity of the music. And at the back of the room, the CEO watched, pride shining in his eyes. He had witnessed the journey from doubt to courage, from invisibility to recognition, and he knew that she had earned every note, every applause, every moment of acknowledgement. The final day of this chapter arrived quietly, like all the others, but it carried the weight of something extraordinary. The maid played a melody that was gentle, heartfelt, and uplifting. The CEO listened, standing near the piano, fully aware of the journey they had shared. In that moment, everything seemed complete, not perfect, but whole. Their lives had been changed by music, courage, and human connection. As the last note faded into the quiet of the lounge, the maid looked at the CEO, and he looked back. There was no need for words. Their eyes spoke volumes: gratitude, understanding, respect, and a deep, unspoken bond. What had begun as a shy girl playing piano had become a story of healing, transformation, and hope. In the weeks and months that followed, life continued, but neither would ever forget what had happened in the lounge of that hotel. The shy maid had discovered her voice, and the broken CEO had rediscovered his heart. Together, they had created something rare, a connection that transcended words, social status, and fear. It was a reminder that even in the quietest corners, miracles could happen, and even the smallest acts, like a melody played with honesty, could change lives forever. And so, the piano remained in its corner, no longer just an instrument, but a symbol of courage, healing, and hope. The maid continued to play, the CEO continued to listen, and both continued to grow in ways they had never imagined. Their story was a quiet testament to the power of human connection, the strength of resilience, and the beauty of a heart willing to share itself with another. In the end, it was simple, yet extraordinary: a shy maid, a melody, and a broken man whose life was changed forever. A story of hope, courage, and the unexpected magic that can happen when someone dares to share their true self.